All right, welcome to Space Revolution, everybody, and welcome to my co-host, Josh. Thank you, sir, for being here.
Thank you, sir. I'm so excited about this. I'll tell you, when I heard you were doing this podcast, I immediately contacted John. I'm like, I want to be on. I want to be on. And I guess everybody else was excited too because I got booked all the way into May. But luckily, due to circumstance, I'm here today.
Well, it's an amazing day for you to be on because it is not only April 1st, so April Fool's Day, it is also Passover. It's also a full moon, which has significance. And it's also the launch of Artemis in the first time in 50 years since we've had astronauts go and circle the moon. And they're going to take off at 6:24 Pacific or Eastern time if everything goes as planned. So I have folks watching the live stream. And, that may be something we not only talk about, but, if you want to go watch that, it's historic. And then you can watch the rest of this after, it's recorded. But this is a seminal day. I'm grateful to have you on such an amazing day.
Yeah, it's, the Artemis 2 mission that's launching Orion there. It's really interesting. We're progressing very, very fast these days. And, if people just look back over the last few years, you can see a radical difference within the technological landscape of humanity and kind of where the world's heading. And this is a lot of what we talk about on my shows, but we include the geopolitical, the geoeconomic analysis into it because that has a lot to do with it, with the base foundation or structure of kind of how technology is evolving and where it's going to evolve to. And, over the last 100 years, that capacity that we're seeing being developed right now really wasn't there. It was there, but it was restricted in massive amounts of ways.
Yeah, it's very true. And so this really gets back to one of the key conversations. And this show, of course, is titled A 500-Year Giant Leap for Mankind. And it harkens back to Armstrong saying, one small step for man, one giant leap for mankind. That giant leap, technologists back then thought it would happen a lot faster than it did, but they weren't counting on the deep state and the slavery and the elements that were going to inhibit human in innovation and invention from moving forward at the speed of light. And now that we have a president that's starting to take down those barriers, you're going to see it accelerate in a way we have never seen before. So whether it's a 500-year leap or it's bigger or less, it's not as important as the fact that we're finally breaking down the walls that are preventing us from actually increasing the health, prosperity, and security of all people on the planet, no matter where they live.
100%. And, I wrote an article a few months ago called The 500-Year Leap. And this was after an analysis over the last 3 years of watching what we call today as artificial intelligence. And whether that's artificial intelligence or not, I think is irrelevant to the fact. But what it does is the key point is that it helps to organize and filter out information, to search massive amounts of data banks. And it has the LLMs, the language learning models, will actually do this, which is one of the first times in human history that we've had a technological superiority over information. And what I mean by that is if we go back through the 20th century and we look at all the scientific experimentation, all the research, all the various different people out there doing innovation and progress, it was all decentralized. It was all people kind of trying to get their ideas into the world. And a lot of them got rejected by corporations. And that's due to overhead costs and profitability and greed and power structures. But for the first time, we're having this capability to where anybody who has an idea or a theory can go out there and they can search data banks of information and begin to integrate it all together and get a more formalized understanding of the universe that we live in, of science, of biology, of chemistry. And I think that that's truly remarkable. And I believe that that is going to kickstart us off on what I would consider to be that 500-year leap in less than probably, I'd say, 20 years.
Yeah, no, I think it's going to accelerate, and it's going to be surprising to people. And one of the books that I have in the outline of this episode is called Breakout. And the reason I want to bring this up at the beginning of the show is because Newt Gingrich has been, a part of this for his whole life. This recognition of the trap we were in globally, and two, how technology can change fate. And he wrote this book in 2013, but it's basically the pioneers of the future, the prison guards of the past, and the epic battle that will decide America's fate. And you can read this. It's far bigger than just technology. The prison guards of the past are the deep state, where they want to cling to their power, their money, their control, and enslave the human race in the new world order. The pioneers of the future are guys like President Trump, and then these technologists that are working on the engineering benches to usher in things that are novel and useful to the human race, to keep us forever out of the shackles of the people enslaving us. And that's why this broken shackle, as the picture on the book, is metaphorical for a number of reasons, not the least of which is the technology, but it's these prison guards of the past that try to keep the status quo. So it's a good book. And what it does is, the space revolution is going to put this on steroids. Newt, of course, knows about space and has written a lot about space, but what he does is he touches on all the major cylinders of society. I talk about this quite a bit, that when you take a look at air, water, food, shelter, transportation, energy, information, and healthcare, those 8 essentials of life, Newt touches on them and shows stories about how we have been crippled and that wet blanket on innovation. And so it's good for the readers to think about. But the thing that's going to be different with space is worth touching on very quickly as we start going into this conversation, Josh. And the first is that having so many inventors pay a lot of money for a vacuum chamber. The reason they want a vacuum chamber is because it allows you to tinker and discover with a molecular level and structures and crystals and every aspect of science in a way you cannot do on Earth. But vacuum chambers are very expensive and they're very small. But in space, it's free. And the second thing is, you get, in space, you have extreme energy from the sun and extreme cold from deep space. So, you turn into the sun and you're experiencing 450 degrees Fahrenheit. You turn around, you face deep space and you're experiencing negative 450 degrees Fahrenheit. And to be able to utilize those two elements is really critical. And then the third piece that we do not have on Earth, that we have in abundance in space, is zero gravity. Because gravity is like a compression force. And in fact, gravity is the wrong word. Compression is the right word. A compression force where you can't do things on Earth that you can do with zero compression or very little compression. And this gets back down to the molecular level. So everything that Newt talks about in this book, it can be done in ways we have never been able to explore on Earth that we will be able to explore in space. And I'll just give you one practical example right now. On Earth, we spin fiber optic cables and we string them under the ocean to be able to communicate at the speed of light anywhere on the planet. There is a company that has been spinning these fiber optic cables in space. And because you can 3D print down to the molecular level, the fiber optic cables they can spin in space, they can spin at a fraction of the cost, and they are literally so much more capable of delivering bandwidth and precision like nothing we could ever build on Earth. And the business case already closes that if you build fiber optic cables in space, you will be able to be the dominant market on Earth as you bring those back down and utilize them. That's just one example, but Newt goes into the medical community and the medical research and the breakthroughs we can achieve that we would never be able to achieve if we did not have access to space and zero gravity, a vacuum, and the energy and cooling that's possible in space.
Yeah. You got me with the gravity as compression force. I love that. That's more aligned
So
with my whole idea of it. But yeah, I mean, moving scientific innovation into space, it opens up so many different parallels. And the biggest problem that I think that we've had with that is government has gotten in the way. You've had large corporations that have had a dominance over various different markets that wanted to keep that power and control, and then money and accessibility of space. I think comes down to the big part is that it was very, very expensive a decade ago to get into space.
yeah. No.
So, we got to once those problems are figured out and it becomes way less expensive to get into space, then innovation can thrive.
Yeah. So Elon Musk has broken that first glass ceiling where he has brought the cost down 10x, and it's going even further where now the businesses that can afford to go into space are going to be almost limitless. And the second one is a glass ceiling that we're breaking at my company, Space Built, where Elon Musk made reusable rockets. So you go to space like with an aircraft, and you don't have to burn it up in the atmosphere after you've built your aircraft and flown to space. You can reuse it. So it's a freight train to space. Right now, we build satellites where we throw them away after they run out of gas. It would be like buying a car off the lot, driving it, and when it runs out of gas, you have to go buy a new car. We build satellites that are totally reusable for infinitely. I mean, you just replace the computers, you replace the thrusters, you refuel it, and as long as the stainless steel structure lasts, which it will for 1,000 years in space, you're good to go.
Yeah, the modular design of the satellite infrastructure is actually really genius, and the fact that you guys are becoming successful in doing that shows us kind of what the next stages are within the space domain. And I call it a domain because now it is something that is actually pertinent here on this planet that is talked about in our daily lives. In the 80s and the 90s, when I grew up, space was this fantastical place that maybe every once in a while you watched the space shuttle launch from NASA,
Right.
but nobody really talked about it on a daily basis. Now we're starting to see that there's corporations that have funding and everything such to move into space, and they are doing so. And we have Artemis right here that's going to be launching to do a loop around the moon. It's such a phenomenal time to be alive, Steve, and we are at the brink of something so great. And space stations, space hotels, moon tourism, space tourism. People look at this and they say, "Well, we're 100 years away from that." I would say no, I don't think we actually are 100 years away from that. Is that we're about to hit a stride of exponential acceleration of humanity, and if the market's there, the market will come.
Yeah, it will. So let me tell a very quick story of history because this is not new. There's nothing new under the sun. And if you are on the inside with the engineers of our age, around the world, not just in America, but around the world, you can see this clearly. But I'll give the example of the invention of the airplane. If you take a look at the front page of the New York Times on October 3rd, 1903, the Congress had gotten so upset because of pouring millions of dollars down into Samuel P. Langley. He was the superior aviation expert of the time, and he was trying to build an airplane, and the government chose him to do it, and they poured tons of money, but every aircraft he built crashed into the Potomac River outside of Bowling Air Force Base. Now it's Anacostia area. It's right where Marine One carries the president to and from the White House on the helicopters. And so Congress finally said, okay, we're gonna charter a study. We're gonna ask the best scientists and engineers in the world to do a study to see whether we should keep wasting our money on a flying machine where everybody's telling us if God meant us to fly, he would have given us wings. And they came out with a study, and on the front page of the New York Times, it was the result of the study, October 3rd, 1903. And it basically said, if we poured all our money into building an airplane, it would take between 1 million and 10 million years to build, or 1,010, you can look at the number, but it was a fantastical number, which basically said it's going to be impossible to ever fly. Now, when you look up the logbook of Wilbur and Orville Wright, that same day, October 3rd, 1903, ironically, there was only one entry on that date, and it said, we begin building today. And what they were building is the Kitty Hawk Kill Devil launch. And 2.5 months later, after the experts of the age proclaimed that we would never build an aircraft, we flew the first aircraft. This is how stuck in the past we can get, and how all the experts will say it'll be 100 years or it'll be never. Yet the breakout is just right under our nose. And that's happening on every aspect. You talk about transportation, you talk about energy, you talk about information, you talk about healthcare, you talk about energy. I mean, at every juncture, we are having a breakout moment, and it's going to just accelerate because President Trump is taking down the barriers that have prevented it from happening for the last 100 years.
Yeah, in not only taking down the barriers, he is doing things that a lot of people disagree with, and people look at the world and they see what Trump is doing, and I think that they have a misunderstanding of the world that we live in, and I hate to say it like that, but I think it's the truth after been doing this for a very, very long time. We see Trump doing a military operation in Venezuela. We see what's happening in Iran right now. And people tend to think of those as kind of isolated incidences, but they're really not. Is we're moving into a new global structure, a multipolar domain of power, of how resources are reallocated around the world, of how trade is distributed, with a new domain of space. And President Trump understands that with the advent of artificial intelligence, if we did not do something now in the context of resource reallocation, of energy corridor control, and basically securing the global energy supply, that we would be in a very, very big problem in the next 3 to 5 years as China begins to advance in artificial intelligence, skyrockets ahead of us in that because of what they had done through the Belt and Roads Initiative, of how they laid the infrastructure over the last 5 years to get resources into China, that's to secure the world energy, to get cheap energy and resources into China. And Trump is really dismantling a lot of that system, which is funded by the same deep state, by this globalist infrastructure that was hoping to see China rise up because they wanted centralized control. They wanted artificial intelligence for surveillance. And Trump has a different vision. And I think that he's compiled a team that understands his vision, but also applied their own kind of visionary aspects to it and refined this plan a little bit. And we are right now moving into a world where anything is possible, but everything is still up in the air. And there's a lot of things that can happen between now and then. But, it becomes predictable for me, for people like me who watch and analyze this day in and day out. I can watch the world and I can kind of see where it's going in the next 5 months and 10 months and 20 months. And with understanding that is every point that we are successful, we move closer and closer to this world. And when this world starts to have its foundation built and come about, I've said it in my show, is I don't think people truly understand the nature of innovation that is going to happen over a very, very short period of time. And to your point, I wanted to throw this out there. This is what I was told in college when I was going through my course study there in physics at CU Boulder. Is a physicist tells you what can happen, an engineer makes it happen, right? Yeah. So we have a lot of great talent and minds in the United States of America who are ready to innovate because innovation has been stifled for the last 50 years.
Yeah. And so as we start getting into some specifics now in our conversation, I just want to hit on a point you made at the beginning, which is really an important one. And that is, humanity builds on the last generation. And just like Steve Jobs could never have invented the smartphone until the internet had been invented, so too, the innovation of the global human race and all these beautiful brains that are so smart have been put on fire because of the serendipitous clashing of ideas that happens because of the internet. And when we, in my company, Space Built, as we develop infrastructure in space where I can deliver a device to somebody anywhere on the planet that's almost free, and that device can give them unlimited access to all of the human nature's knowledge. And they can sort it using AI reasoning models to sort through the BS from what is true. Now you just increase the potential for innovation 1,000-fold. And so the human race is building on all of this technology. And this is why technology does change fate, just like the internal combustion engine or controlling fire. And this is one other reason why we are sitting on the precipice of greatness. It's not just because there's been all this pent up innovation because of the bureaucracy, the deep state, and governments that try to control you and basically say you can't handle the truth, and we'll tell you what you should know, when you should know it, and how you should know it. Not only are we breaking out of that prison, but we are also breaking into this world community where these innovative minds can collaborate. That I did a study when I was in uniform. I chartered a study to look at the geography of innovation through time, meaning I wanted to know why innovation took place in certain geographic spots and why and in what temporal geography, meaning in time. And what was fascinating about it is that innovation happened in these batch files, if you will. And so this 500-year leap that we're talking about is not something that we're just making up. This is true to historical behavior with regard to innovation. And the second is there is a geographical footprint to it too, where the Renaissance period or, in China back in, the 1300s, there are geographical areas where it's almost like a fire starter, where there's kindling and then a spark, and then the fire breaks out. It was more localized back in the day, but with the internet, it now when there's kindling and a spark, it turns the whole world on fire in a good way. And that's what we're about to experience here, is that not just in America, but all over the world, because these bright minds are all over the place. It's just so exciting to be alive right now. And, people should have great hope that the businesses and the good minds of our time, they figure it out. And those fear mongers that want to scare you with technology, because movies that are scary sell. Fear does sell. But do not believe those people that try to make you cower into a corner, that this technology and these breakouts are going to be bad. Because as long as there's more good people on the planet than there are bad people, and there's not that many people that are just born evil, that want to hurt others and enslave others, we are going to win so big and so wonderfully against all these evil people that it's not even going to be fair.
Agreed. And to your point there, this is actually in building out the 500-year leap, the article that I wrote. I went back to some old research, and I've been researching for decades, man. And one of the books that I read, well, you don't really read this book, you kind of go through it, but there's an attachment book that goes along with it. It was Generations by Strauss and Howe, two Columbia University history professors that did the research in the 1990s since the end of the Roman Empire to modern day. And they looked at social, economic, and cultural transitions and political transitions. And what they did is they ended up writing another book called The Fourth Turning, which I think everybody's talking about.
Yeah.
And this is how psychologically within human culture that we go through these various different trend lines of kind of, we come up to a high point, and then we begin to decline very, very rapidly. And then we move back up. And when you start to look at this hierarchy, you start to see very similar to what I would say is like a super cycle that occurs every maybe 10 generations or something like that, the super cycle, but that compounds into technological innovation. And I mean, this is whether it's something that is happening divinely from God or whatnot, like Leibniz and Newton both discovering calculus at the same time, right?
Yeah.
We have to ask ourselves that, but also it's pretty profound because we are at that point right now. And this is what I try to stress, is that whether it's universal, whether it's just something within human psychology, whether it's divinely guided, we are there right now. And that's what makes this point in time so truly important.
I know. And I appreciate the opportunity to have this show remind our listeners and their families and friends about this reality that those of us that have been steeped in technology our whole lives have been watching these trends, see and understand. Because if you don't, you can feel like, like they've said many, many times throughout history, there's always a generation that will say, well, everything that can be invented has been invented. And, what we have is all we're going to ever have. And it is so far from the truth. I want everybody to feel this inspiration that and it's not just the innovations, it's the young generation. Those under 30 are smart as hell. They see the mess that has been made. They understand the root cause, and they are mad as hell in a good way. And they are coming at the future with a vengeance to shape it and to build it into something that is peaceful, that is happy, that ushers in beauty and art and love. I mean, these are the things that they are focused on, and they are not going to let the old generation that's trying to enslave them get in the way. And I tell you, you hear this, and they are organized, and they are coming at it, and they're building on all the things we have built up as a human race to this point. They're building on that. So they're not starting from scratch, and it's going to be awesome. And I see the launch is now back on, and that's good. So 9 minutes. So looking forward to that. Yeah.
Now you said something there. You said that there's certain people out there. I call them the pessimists in the world. That everything that's ever going to be invented or created has already been created. I look at it from the optimistic perspective that in the future advancement of humanity, everything that could ever have been invented and discovered is right in front of us, waiting to be discovered. Right? Is that the new breakthrough sciences of tomorrow are sitting right here in front of us. God has placed all of the information right in front of us for us to discover. We simply just have to go through the motions of that discovery process. And I when I searched through the spiritual meanings of life and try to find the meaning of life, one of the things that I came up to was that life is about the aha moments. It's about the epiphanies. It's about discovering the things that nobody's ever discovered before. It's about having the thoughts that are unique unto the universe that have never been had before. And I try to wrap my life around that. I try to think and look at the world in that construct. Is what am I missing? What am I seeing that other people are not seeing? What questions can I ask that nobody else is thinking or doing that? And I've taken that and applied that a lot to the scientific community, because I think that we have a controlled scientific community. I think we have a scientific community that is controlled by academia and large government bureaucracy. I think that we have it controlled for a reason, for greed and profit. And on the Sean Ryan podcast, you said something that made me clip it, put it out of my show, and I think millions of others did as well. As you said, Einstein laid, paraphrasing, Einstein laid the foundation for modern science, but we know today that Einstein is wrong.
Yeah.
Now, can you elaborate on that? Because I've been dying to ask you that question.
Yeah. So, and Einstein said this himself. He said, what I've done is I've taken this as far as I can, but I can already see that it's wrong. And I'll have to leave that to another generation to find out, that this is a very small slice of the universe that I'm describing with these postulates and theorems and these theories that I have. And it's a very small slice, and it doesn't fit when you move outside of that slice. And we can see that now. We just don't know enough to know how it doesn't fit, and whether there's a broader theory that it can explain physical reality, what is in all these domains. And quantum is primarily the reason. I mean, there was evidence of the way quantum behaved even before Einstein passed away, and that is specifically what I'm talking about. So here is a point exactly to what you just said, and that is the traditional scientific enterprise clings to the kind of the general theory of relativity, knowing that there's a lot of antibodies saying that it's not quite right, but there's just a very, very difficult time letting go. So we still use it to explain things, and we still use it as a useful tool, but with more and more growing suspicions that we need to stop using it, because it's actually leading us down the wrong path, the wrong conclusions. It's inhibiting our ability to move forward as a human race. Then there's the quantum theories, and that's where people are actually making progress, like on compression or gravity, and on propulsion, and on time travel, and the reality that our universe is not about space, time, and matter. In fact, it proves by its behavior that consciousness comes before space, time, and matter. That space, time, and matter are mutable, but consciousness is the foundation upon which everything is built. And that consciousness, for me, is God, and God's his knowing that he has always been, he will always be, and he created heaven and earth. So it is so fun for me to see the evidence of God in the, designed into the fabric of the universe. And that's what Einstein was saying when he said, and when we say Einstein knew he was wrong, but it was the best he could do. And it's our job to take it to the next level. And we are, but we're dragging the scientific community kicking and screaming. And again, that's an overstatement, because there are plenty of scientists that realize this and are stretching their intellectual muscles to move into the new reality. But there's a whole bunch that are still clinging to the paradigm of the past. They are the prison guards of the past, as Newt says in his book. And the pioneers of the future get beat up by the prison guards of the past, because the prison guards of the past are wealthy. They're making their money on the old paradigm, and they don't want it to change because you're going to move their cheese.
Spot on. I love that. And I always got to go back, because gravity is the one quintessential force that if we were able to master and to manipulate, then the world drastically changes. And we talk about magnitudes greater than the expansion that we're about to have. And you call it compression. And I find that interesting, because I've developed a theory, and I'm not going to go into the theory, but I've developed a theory over the last decade. It was one of the reasons why I went to CU Boulder. And this thing that was just bugging me, how God talks to you sometimes, and you just have something that's in your head and you have to get it out. And I went out there and I started, I'm familiar with GR and how GR operates. And I just didn't like the way that it was explained. I didn't like the way that it was constructed, and it just never made sense to me. And I tried to say that, well, if God constructed this universe, then what he would do is he would put hints and clues all around us. He would repeat the patterns over and over and over again. Yeah. And one of the things I began to realize is that gravity is not this necessarily mass distorting space-time. Instead, I look at it as more of like a bowling ball being dropped into the water. The water pushes on the bowling ball with the equal amount of force of the displacement of the bowling ball in the water. And if we look at that as the vacuum of space itself, then we can start to see that gravity is this compression force of the vacuum trying to go back to some zero point of optimization or equilibrium. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, no, so I think that your intuition is very profound, and it's correct. How it's exactly mechanized, we still are trying to discover. But there are certain people that God has given a gift to be able to see the universe in a pure way. The individual I talked to you about at the beginning, that is helping me, he's inventing it. I'm just putting it together logistically, a global network where people can triangulate truth. And know what is, meaning that any lie breaks physical laws of the universe. The universe is designed to be true. And when you can see the places where there is a physical anomaly to what is physically a part of our universe, that's a lie. And but I say that because he's a guy like you who can see the universe much more clearly than normal people like me that have a normal brain. I mean, there is something about that. And these gifts are given to the human race by God at certain moments in time. And they're generally the ones that take us to a next level. So it's that gentleman I talked to you about that's under, he's like the under 30. He's the guy that introduced me to this compression, not gravity is the wrong term. It makes us think about it in the wrong way. It's compression, and there is compression everywhere in the universe. So therefore, there's energy anywhere in the universe, and it means that the universe is connected in a way where it explains why a molecule here will move instantaneously with a molecule 100 billion light years away, because there is no space or time between them. They are connected in the fabric of this universe. So we have 35 seconds, and we'll talk more about that in a second, but 35 seconds,
let's do it.
30 seconds now. Let's watch this, and then let's talk about what we're watching, because for people that have not been studying space and space technology since the 1960s, they may think this is just a regular rocket launch. but it represents so much more, and we can talk about that.
Sure. I'm pumped. This is a historic moment, and it's crazy.
Yeah, I know. On Passover, April Fools, and a full moon. And here we go. I live in Florida, and if you go outside on my roof, you can probably see and hear this.
Oh, that's so awesome. Well, we were there for the last GART, which was and I missed the launch that actually happened, but
Yeah, there were launches you could watch in both GARTs we had in Cocoa Beach. Were you at the second one or the first one?
I was at the second one. This is the
Yeah.
last one we
So
just had.
the first one had a launch late at night, so it was really, really spectacular. But it did bounce off the firmament. Just kidding.
Well, you know,
that's a nod to our flat earthers.
well, and that's also a point that we should talk about after this is that I saw some of the comments, space is fake and all this stuff, and that
Mhm.
goes back into the gentleman that you were just talking about, and then reorienting truth and getting truth out there and aligning truth, because these things are destructive in the
Yeah.
context of society and how they deal in the psychological mindset. My show last night, we were talking about this pertaining to a lot of the stuff happening with another General Flynn and stuff like that. And I said, look, why? Ask yourself why. And if you can't articulate a why to what you're stating, then you don't truly understand it.
Yeah.
And I think that that's one thing that everybody needs to start understanding when they say space is fake or this launch is fake, and that it's it's all CGI or AI. And well, the
Yeah.
question is why. And if you can articulate that and answer that, and you can tell me why this is fake, how thousands of people are videotaping and filming this right now with their cell phones live right there in Cape Canaveral, then tell me how that's possible.
Yeah, no, that's a good angle to come at it with. But there are other ways of demonstrating truth. For example, the you know, if let's say you're flying a quadcopter, or let's say you're flying a drone. Okay, you have these little drones, and you fly the drone, and the drone has a little camera. Okay, and it's doing telemetry with you, so you can see the view in your little handheld device, and that drone goes over a wall. It's on the other side of the wall, but the RF signal still can reach you, and you can still see. Um, you know, with going to the moon, it would be like saying that no, now it's fake and gay. Now that drone doesn't exist. Because I can't see it.
Right.
Even though you have all the telemetry, you can see exactly how far it is away. You can see how high it is. You can see through its camera. You have all the evidence that it is real. And you may be looking at your kid on the other side of the wall, and that's your kid. And so you have all the evidence to say this is real. But then it's really easy for somebody to say, well, I can't see it, therefore it's not real, and you're lying to me. And the question is why? Why would I lie to you about that? And so it's a good way of coming at these things. But what we have not done yet as a human race, we have not built the tools to allow us to see what is true in this digital age we live in. Because with AI and soon quantum, the speed at which technology can create something that looks real and feels real is almost impossible to understand. The only way you really know is if you're in the room with me. I have enough time knowing you as a friend to know that it's you and it's not a robot or somebody with a mask on, and that you are telling me the truth because I believe you are not lying to me from your heart. But you can even lie to me from your heart, and I know it's you, and I believe it, and then I'm the dope, So, but there are physical realities in our world where, again, God made this universe to ring true. The truth will set you free, and truth is at the core of all understanding. And the universe was built to be true. And so there are ways of using quantum and other techniques to be able to say that is not true. for all of these reasons. And it's just brilliant. And it's building on, you couldn't do it without supercomputing. You couldn't do it without AI and quantum. You couldn't do it without some of the other technologies we have. But now we can, and we need to build this tool so that people can say, I cannot believe that because I can't tell if it's true or not. This I believe because it rings true and it's from somebody I trust.
Absolutely. Yeah. And the one of the problems that I see with the structure that's being built today is with AI. I mean, we are in the very elementary parts of artificial intelligence right now, and people take what AI says as the truth and that it cannot be disrupted. And that's actually the very, very wrong assessment. I mean, there was just a study done by MIT that Chat GPT itself is sycophantic towards people, is that it tends to just confirm your own biases. And if we have any type of infrastructure built out within AI on the truth aspect, I believe that it has to be integrated into some system that is decentralized and controlled by the people, democratized in a certain way, that where if we start seeing the resemblance of non-truths come out in a truth platform, then people have the ability to leave that platform in the context of its computational power or energy input, which then declines that whole system. And the reason that becomes important is because when you have a competitive environment, now people start to realign towards other systems that are the purveyors of truth. And this is, for me, this is reminiscent of the 10th Amendment of the United States Constitution, and how this was devised within the Articles of Confederation, or sorry, not the Articles of Confederation, of the letters between Madison and Jefferson. And this is the idea that states were meant to be competitive. States were meant to be competitive amongst each other in the context of legality, in the context of their developing economies, to where if one state had incredibly high taxes and started the draw about laws that restricted people, then people had the ability to leave that state and go to another state that was thriving. And then that state's income and GDP would begin to decline, to where it forces them to change their laws, their rules, their policies, and their tax structure. And this is exactly what we're seeing happen right now to California. And I think that if we took that same conceptual model and applied it to the innovative infrastructure that's being built out right now, then we would have more of a system built on truth that actually serves humanity, other than the one that tries to control it.
No, that's it's very true, and this is why I use this analogy. We as a human race are like teenagers with awkward muscles trying to move into this networked age, and we have not yet developed the muscle control to do it right, and we don't have the tools to survive. So it's a very dangerous time for the human race. But it is also a time that is fertile ground for the kind of inventions we're talking about. And those inventors are out there and they're working, and it's coming to a theater near you. So it is moving out. So I wanted to now transition to some things that are specific about this 500-year leap, because and again, how you define whether it's 500 or 300, I think that the temporal dimension of these leaps forward get shorter and shorter because innovation happens faster and faster. Now we have Moore's law, where there's a very consistent pattern with how things are invented. But because of the internet, because of the interconnection of all humanity, I think we're going to continue to see an acceleration of these things. And in fact, it reminds me of we got a rant last time on the show that was pre-recorded by Theory Conspiracy on X, saying, hey, are you familiar with Walker Russell's theory claiming there's two major forces, electricity seeking higher pressure and magnetism seeking lower pressure? This gets back to one of the breakouts that will happen at some point here in the near future. And it goes back to this, to compression. Where whether you're talking about electrostatics, or you're talking about magnetism, or you're talking about electricity, it's a whole new world of understanding about how things move in the universe and why they move, and the fact that with every movement there's a potential energy that we can tap into as a human race. So I'd like you to comment a little bit on that, because as I go to these conferences with scientists from around the world talking about energy, And the fact that they can actually do what I'm about to say, but they can't figure out how or why yet. They don't know how to control it, but they can create a bubble where if you as a human being are in that bubble, you can accelerate to the speed of light or beyond without being crushed. In other words, it is impervious to the compression or the gravity, which right now, if I'm a human being and I'm in a spaceship and I'm 100 feet off the ground and I accelerate to the speed of light, it'll crush me. Yep. Because we can only sustain a certain handful of G's before we die. And the fact that G force is no longer existent is a big deal. And they've been able to prove this. They just don't know how to build it or control it or commercialize it, if you will. And the second is, of course, that this compression exists anywhere on the universe. And with spinning disks, they can tap into that compression energy. The analogy I use is a rock on top of a mountain is sitting still. But we know it has potential energy because if it was next to a cliff and you rolled it off a cliff, it would hit the ground with the power of dynamite. The same is true with compression, that anywhere you're at in the universe, there is an energy source right there. And we've been able to tap into it, but the explosions have been so aggressive, we don't know how to control it. But the scientists are going to get there, and it's really exciting. But it's not small energy. This is big energy. And it is, is something that, you watch that rocket take off, we are still shackled with chemical propulsion that is dangerous. It's pollutant. It is, expensive. And we are on the verge of a 500-year leap of humanity in transportation and propulsion, because once we can harness this energy that exists in the compression that exists everywhere in the universe.
Yeah. So, I love this part of the conversation. So, number one is Walter Russell. One of my good friends is the former head of the Walter Russell Museum in Virginia. And he's been on Walter Russell for decades, and truly a great human being there, and familiar with Walter Russell. I got his books over here. I got, actually, you're talking about books, and I bought this back, I think, in the early 2000s, The Lost Inventions of Nikola Tesla. And one of the most fascinating things I've ever read, and you try to do these experiments yourself and replicate it. But then in the aspect of kind of what you're talking about here is new propulsion systems that will take humanity farther beyond just the moon and to the Mars and into the stars. Rocket technology obviously get us to Mars, but how to harness that? I think that there has to be a fundamental change in the psychology of science. That this is the example that I use, and hopefully that it relates to people, is that throughout the last, few thousand years, we've discovered nails and screws and plywood and planks and windows. And we take these things and we start to construct what we believe the house looks like. We start to put, 137,000 nails into one board, and we put a window at the top, and we say, maybe this is what the structure looks like. But in actuality, it's a skyscraper. And we're not really truly understanding how the component parts fit into it. And I think that comes down with one of the base concepts in science, and that is the definition of energy. And you go into classical physics, it's energy, it's the ability to do work. You go into biological systems, right? You go into quantum physics. They all have different variations of what energy actually is.
Yeah.
And when you start to look at this, is energy is just something that portrays it into motion, whether it's mass, energy, a field, but they all have these correlating kind of aspects of this foundational dynamic of the universe, this prime mover, this prime engagement phenomena that produces what we have within the existential reality of the universe. And I think that gravity is a result of that part of the system. I always think of things in systems theory. So I'm very systematic of how I always have to build a foundation. I have to build a system off of that, and I build frameworks in part of all of those systems. And I look at the universe in much of the same way. And in the context of gravity, I look at gravity as, well, firstly, the vacuum of space or space-time. You said that that compression exists everywhere. And I absolutely agree with you. And the reason that compression exists everywhere is because I believe space-time itself is a sum-zero state. And this is very similar to destructive interference in electromagnetic wave phenomena. Is that if I take a transceiver here and a transceiver here, and I shoot one wave at 180, one wave here and another wave at the same frequency, 180 degrees out of phase, I get destructive interference. It's undetectable in the center, but that's a sum-zero state. And I still have two energy supplies that are producing those waves. So the wave isn't gone. It's just in a sum-zero state of that destructive interference. And I believe that the vacuum of space actually prefers that destructive interference or that sum-zero type of state. And then when you have any type of field perturbation that goes through that field, it disrupts it. And when it disrupts, that field pushes back. And that push back onto that perturbation is what we call gravity, or field compression. Very similar to a bowling ball being submerged into the ocean pushes back onto the bowling ball while the bowling ball is displacing the ocean. And the idea there is that throughout the last 50 years, we've had this idea, this concept of anti-gravity. I don't like the word. I think that the word is completely wrong. And really what we need is asymmetrical field potential. Is we have to learn how to take the field of gravity that we know of, the compression field, and utilize it, producing asymmetry within the vacuum of space itself to forward bias us into propulsion. And I think that is going to be the new line of physics that's going to come about over the course of the next probably decade, is trying to master how to manipulate the field itself. And we have to come to the idea that it is a field, right?
Yeah, no, it's important because for me, mindset is oftentimes our biggest prison guard. Mindset is the thing that traps us from being able to define the problem and solutions in a different way. Mindset is so powerful. And again, I'm going to go back to an aviation example because it may surprise people. When they were trying to invent an airplane, the reason they couldn't get it to work is they thought that they had to make the airplane so stable so that it could fly from point A to point B and withstand any wind gust. Okay, we know that's silly. I mean, Mother Nature is going to bring you a gust of wind where you can't throw a little paper airplane and hope that it's going to go in a straight line to the point you want it to hit every single time and land safely. It's just silly. But that was the mindset that was trapping the entire world from figuring out how to fly. And all the traditionalists, all the aerospace engineers, all the aviation engineers couldn't figure it out. Then two bicycle shop mechanics, Wilbur and Orville, said, well, wait a minute. What if you just don't try to make it so stable that it can fly from point A to point B? What if you just take what Mother Nature throws at you and then bend the wing to go the other way and steer your way to the point you want, even if the wind blows you off course for a few seconds? That sounds like stupid simple to everybody right now, but it was transformational to the world. And that's why when they finally did fly at Kitty Hawk Kill Devil Hills, everybody on the planet invented an airplane within months. Okay. The same thing is going to happen here, where we are stuck in a mindset. And that's what you described, a mindset about the way we think things are, and it's wrong. And if you can just open up your mind, you don't have to be the physicist, you don't have to be an expert in technology, but just be open-minded to the fact that what you think you know, you may not know. And for the average, most people don't want to be a PhD scientist in astrophysics or in quantum theory. But it is important to realize the power of technology and at least make yourself aware. It is our duty as citizens of the world to make ourselves smart on what's going on. And there's plenty of material. In fact, the hard part is finding out what to read and what not to read. But we have to be intellectually curious and not lazy. And when you do that, you start opening up your mind and realizing that you know less than you think. In fact, this humility of not getting trapped in a mindset is a really important habit to create in your brain as you're looking at these technologies.
Yeah, and mindsets have this kind of conformity aspect of them within the sociological structure. I actually, what you're describing, I call the Bannister effect. And if people remember 1954, Roger Bannister broke the 4-minute mile. But prior to that time frame, doctors would come out and tell you that you'll have a heart attack, your heart will explode if you try to break the 4-minute mile. And there's this mindset within the social construct where nobody could do it until somebody did. And after Roger Bannister broke the 4-minute mile, then what happened? You had high schoolers now in 7th grade breaking the 4-minute mile. Thousands upon thousands, millions of people had broken the 4-minute mile.
Yeah.
And what happens is once humanity realizes it's possible, anything can happen.
Yeah, it is a testament to how God has created us. We are infinite creatures with brains that only use 10% of our capacity, but even that 10%, God gives certain gifts of insight and creativity. And the other piece is not just for us to read about this stuff and be curious about it where we can, but it's also to realize that the power of your vote to the politicians that control much of what the government does is really, really critical. What I mean by that is technology can be used as a weapon as well as something that is used for good. And it's the political class that actually ends up defending us and making sure technology is used consistent with our morals and our values. And it's politicians that can get away with murder, literally, if we don't hold them accountable. So part of this journey is for people to recognize that our government structures, our governance, is a critical key to a successful future. That this edge of greatness, this golden age that we're moving into, will only be golden if we are paying attention to the technology and we are paying attention to our politicians. And so the tool to be able to have AI track every decision any politician makes, and is it consistent with our Constitution, and is it consistent with our values? If we need to basically shine a huge light on every decision made in a smoky, dark back room by any politician that has power over our future. That has to happen, or we'll be right back in this spot in 50 years.
Yeah, and I think that's one of the great things about the Trump administration right now is that for the longest time, people have lost their voice. And I look at the people as part of the fourth branch of government. You have the lobby and you have the people, and it's always in this competitive environment, but people never knew they were competing in that environment. And we finally have an administration that listens to us to the point where we can demand accountability. We can go out there and get a redress of our grievances from our politicians, and they're actually going to listen because of who is in office. And this is the great practice to build up this skill that that the American people need to have in order to bring about the proper functionality of government. So great time to be alive. And I have some questions I have to ask you.
Okay.
And I know we only got a few minutes left.
That's okay. Why don't we ask them? Because we haven't touched on time travel, aliens, and all kinds of other things.
Well, so number one is I'm not gonna go out there and be like, dude, were you ever part of any secret government programs that knew the existence of aliens? To me, I was in the Navy for 10 years. I deployed to the South Pacific. We were over on the Galapagos Islands. There was one night we had this object come up on the horizon to look like a flare. Called the bridge. I went back up to combat. We have nothing on our radars. We're watching it on the big eyes. We end up deploying our helo towards it. It starts moving away from our helo and then submerges into the ocean. We watch it on FLIR. And it just went into the ocean. Captain came out and was like, yeah, delete everything from the logbooks. I don't go on to take care of this, right? But we had multiple occurrences within the Caribbean and the South Pacific of these types of events. And it culminated my last time out to sea that we watched 6 objects in space that looked like satellites flying like this. And then 3 more came like this, and they kind of went like this. And the whole ship was watching it. We had 50 people out on the deck. I've had experiences my whole life with anomalous phenomena. I have a story that I used to tell all the time of an abduction, that I was abducted. And I don't know if it was true or not. I remember the story. I remember what happened. I remember 10 years old with me and my buddy. We're going to my dad's house. We're crawling through a field at 11:30 at night. We snuck out. And we watch this plane coming in the Rochester International Airport. And it's just a bright light in the sky. And it gets lower and lower. And I remember looking at my buddy and going, there's no sound. And the next thing I know, we're crawling again, and it's on wet grass, and I'm soaking wet. And we get up and we ran to my dad's house, but this is 6 hours later.
Yeah.
And so I've had these experiences in my life that I can say that they don't appear to be human, right? That whatever that is interacting with, whether it's angels and demons, interdimensionals, extradimensionals, extraterrestrial, I don't know, right? But there is something, there is a phenomena. And I do believe that right now it is culminating to a massive crescendo of the truth is going to be revealed in some variance, right? And so the question I actually have pertains to the development of artificial superintelligence and how we are moving into this realm and world. And if you understand the Star Trek mythology, you got things like the Prime Directive and First Contact. And then up until this point, we've been in the Prime Directive. You don't interfere with the developing civilization, but once they obtain faster than light travel, they can affect other civilizations so that you have to intervene and make first contact. So my question is do you think that with the birth of artificial superintelligence, this will derive a first contact type of scenario?
I think it's possible, and but I need to this goes back to having an open mind. First contact with what is what we don't know, and based on now this knowledge about the fact that time and space and matter are all mutable, meaning that there can be multiple dimensions of time. There can be patterns of existence that are in different dimensions. Who we are experiencing, what we are experiencing, we just don't know, and we don't know why it's not more clear what it is. So living in this ambiguity is hard. It makes people crazy, but there's no question that honest, good, God-fearing people have seen these things again and again in the air, on the land, at sea, and in space. And we don't know. Now, there are some people that may know some more than others, but I think that this 500-year leap is going to reveal what this is more fully, and the human race can handle it, and it's going to help break us out of these prison guards of the past, where our entire mindset about how time, space, and matter are set. And once we open our minds to the fact that they are not set and that we can actually control them because we are smart and we know the universe follows these rules and laws that God has ultimate control over. But I think this 500-year leap will include some of these answers that we don't have now, that frustrate us, but there's you're right, I have them too. So I know for a fact there's stuff out there going on around us that we have no clue who it is or why, and we want to know, and we will eventually.
Gotcha. Gotcha. Now the other question is kind of off topic, but it's relatively in the same construct. We just had Artemis obviously launch. It's on its way right now to the moon. We haven't really been back to the moon since the 1970s, and I don't know if that's necessarily true. And I'm not expecting you to tell me classified information or anything like that.
Yeah.
But Dan Driscoll, the Secretary of the Army, made an interesting comment on the 250th anniversary of the Army's birthday. And
Yeah.
I believe he was on Fox News or some news broadcast, and he said that I just talked to a soldier who's an astronaut on the moon.
Mm-hmm.
Now, that wasn't a Freudian slip. He was talking as if that event actually happened. And if we have
Mm-hmm.
Army soldiers on the moon, I don't doubt for 1 minute that maybe the Air Force and the Army or the military has tried to go out and construct in space, to do scientific experimentation in space, moon bases. But what are your thoughts on Dan Driscoll's comment?
Yeah, so it's hard for me to speak for him or to know what he was wanting to communicate there, but I can speak to my own experiences, and that is that right now my company has a computer on the south pole of the moon, and it's one of the first computers that can actually facilitate AI edge computing and reasoning models, meaning computation at the edge in space, which has never been done before. And so this and again, the reason I know it's there is because I watched the telemetry as it was going up into the sky and out into orbit, and I could so the physics, the reality of this thing that we built, that we put on a rocket, that is now on the south pole of the moon, is real. And so again, there are reasons to reveal and conceal in the art of war, and there is dissuasion, and there is all kinds of cloak and dagger things going on, because ultimately it's an information war out there in the military domain as well. And it's not healthy to and again, so you could ask him the question directly, but I think you would get an answer that was like, I said what I said. And
Yeah.
and it may drive you crazy, but there was a reason he said it. Okay. And what that reason is, only he may know, and maybe he's the only one that should know, because if our enemy, you just don't tell your enemy your plans.
100%. I love that. Great answer, by the way. And I know we got to get going here. What is coming up? What can the next 2 years look like? What do you think's going to happen?
Yeah.
And I mean that in the whole construct of the world. I mean, not just technologically, not just with space, but with where we are headed, the trajectory that we are on.
Yeah, I think that we have reached a tipping point where even if the politics kind of backslide, and I think the human race is self-organized now in a way where it recognizes the trap it's been in with these centralized supply chains of food, water, shelter, transportation, energy, information, all of these things, and that individual entrepreneurs are building systems that democratize and put the power of these things in the hands of people. And I believe that on the information side, never again will the small few be able to lie to the masses the way they've done before. And that's just going to get better and better. I think that we have truly come to an age where, again, there's no panacea, but I base this on a historical trend line where every invention that comes onto the scene, it is feared by a certain group of people. It is maligned as evil. When the airplane was first invented, people said it was immoral to build an airplane because it could drop a bomb on somebody's head. And they're right. Sadly, it can, but it can also transform the global economy. And so the trend line is more people are living in prosperity, health, and security now than ever before in the history of mankind. And it's a testament to me that when there's an invention, even though it could be used as bad and it could be used for evil, and in many cases it is used for evil, like people are using the internet and AI right now for evil things, like human trafficking, sex trafficking, and all the money laundering and all that. As the human race grapples with the new technology, businesses and good people design tools to make it effective and good for the human heart, the loving heart that wants to love one another as God loves us. And so this trend line has been proven throughout the history of mankind. And I believe that it will continue, that all of these technologies, as they unfold in the health sector, the energy sector, the information sector, all of these, that we will see turbulent waters, people trying to scare us, people trying to get us to not use it. But eventually businesses and entrepreneurs are going to figure this out. And I believe it will be very hard for a small group of people on the planet to enslave the rest of us. I think that that jig is up, but there'll be some other problem we'll have to deal with in the future. But that's a chapter for a different book.
Fantastic. And you heard it here first, guys. The future is going to be amazing.
Yeah. Well, I know that, it's frustrating for our listeners too, because there are literally 1,000 things we could talk about with this title of a 500-year, leap for mankind. But part of this show is to really get you excited to go out and read on your own, because the most important attribute of your brain is being an aggressive learner. The most important piece of being effective, being happy, and being able to protect your family, your friends, and your future is being an aggressive learner. That means being intellectually curious and having the energy to actually learn. And so I encourage everybody, we've touched on just a fraction of the topics, but get out there and read. And again, that's why I try to recommend a book for every show. Some shows it doesn't really lend itself well to a book, because we are on the leading edge in many cases of some of these things where a lot of books haven't been written, or the books are so technically detailed that the average person that's not a PhD in astrophysics, would just it would put me to sleep. So, But I'll go to episode 1 and read Irreducible, which will introduce you to some of the concepts you brought up, Josh, of we have been stuck in the wrong mindset about quantum and general theory of relativity. And that as we look more and more into quantum, it's the evidence of God. And it explains all these unexplained phenomenon, UFOs, aliens. It starts explaining why that could be real and not a big deal, because of the way the fabric of the universe has been designed by our infinite maker that has made us infinite creatures. So I encourage everybody to learn, read, ask questions, and I'll shout out one other rant that we got. And again, this one came in from the last show, but because it was recorded, I didn't get to talk to it. And it's from Makes Sense to Me Too. And it's basically just saying that thank you for these comments. And he said, Grok says that there's a loop of space robots building and reusing everything they build. That way it's almost a perpetual abundance engine. And so I wanted to call that one out, because one of the ways you can talk about this future is it will be a future of abundance, meaning that we are in a mindset where, okay, there's just so much resource on the earth. We have 8+ billion people, and there are people out there saying we need to thin the herd. Okay, it is the wrong mindset. God has given us infinite energy, resources, and information from space, from the heavens to reach to. And it's only a lack of our own imagination where we can't increase the pie for all humanity and live in peace with one another and be able to discover evil quickly and kill it in its tracks before it can affect millions of people, as it has done in the industrial age. This is emerging out of the industrial age into the network age with more peace, more prosperity. And like I say in the intro, our Constitution is our most powerful gift because it is rooted in the natural law, which is the law that God has given us and said, follow my way and you will be happy and you will live. Ultimately, that's what this future is about. It's about our morality. It's about our never trusting our government and keeping our government on a tight leash and yanking it as often as we need to keep it healed to us, the people with the power, but only if we maintain our morality and our values. Because if we lose that, then we lose our culture, then we lose our government, then we lose our souls.
That's right. And people don't want to know who we lose it to, because the enemy out there is far more creative and dangerous than we can ever imagine.
Yeah.
And so that's why I tell President Trump out there, thank you, because even though people might not agree with how he's doing things, he's doing them the only way that they can be done to secure the future of America. And I assure people that within 5 years, you'll see the fruits of what is happening today in the world, and you'll begin to see the world that is being created.
Yeah, that's well said, and I couldn't agree more. Okay, Josh, thank you so much. Let's do this 100 more times over the next number of years, and then we can look back and say, see what I just told you. And I'll end with one little cute note that I just heard. In Star Trek, some of the later ones where Scotty says, "You guys don't have transparent aluminum." What are you guys living in the Stone Age? So he just, and he's like, God, I forgot you hadn't discovered that yet. Guess what? They've discovered it. There is a company that makes transparent aluminum.
That's huge. That's going to be pretty cool.
I know. So cool. So, but this goes back to storytellers and people with unique gifts like Roddenberry can see around the corner. They can see the changes of trend lines of technology, and the human brain is an infinite machine of innovation. And the universe is so full of all this diversity of and flexibility that literally we can invent anything we decide to invent. I'm convinced of that. The human brain, with God's help, can invent anything we decide to invent. There is nothing that is impossible. And God even tells us that, with the faith of a mustard seed, you can move mountains.
Well, and he tells us how to do it in Romans 12 too, right? Is do not conform to the patterns of this world, but be transformed by the renewal of your own mind.
There you go.
And that's about education. That's about going out there and reading and learning about the world and not just accepting the status quo simply because someone told you. And that's the one thing. And it's the scarcity mindset. It's the scarcity world that we've lived in. You're talking about resources. The reason we live in this world that's controlled and dominated by fear and greed and power is because of the scarcity mindset. And, you know, the more people start to read and understand and educate themselves on the abundance that God has provided for us, you start to realize that that was just a big scam and that we can forge our own future. And it starts right here, right now with us understanding that it's possible.
Yeah, it's so true. All right. Well, thank you so much again for being my co-host, and let's do it again. And to all the listeners, that rocket launch you just saw is the first step to a very bright future, and the space revolution is coming to a theater near you.
Love it.
Thank you. See you later. Bye-bye.
Every Easter, one brave bunny takes on a very important mission. Spreading Easter joy. And apparently dropping most of it. And sometimes there's goat-related complications. Skincare so good even the goats might want it. Because Easter is really about the greatest victory ever. Hope, renewal, and a promise kept. And every soft disclosure purchase supports 6 small American businesses working together. Use code GRACE for 15% off. Soft disclosure, good for your skin, and apparently approved by goats.
Patriots, the fight for truth doesn't stop at the screen. It's hitting the road again. Badlands Media is rolling into Nashville on April 9th through 12th for the next stop on the Great American Restoration Tour. Join your favorite Badlands hosts and like-minded Americans for 3 powerful days. Packed with unfiltered discussions, deep dive panels, and real debate. Hear the raw truth, ask the tough questions. No topic too hot, no question too bold. GART is where our community comes alive. Tickets are on sale now at badlandsmedia.tv/GART, where you can also grab a virtual pass and watch from home. Join us to question narratives and fight for America's future. Nashville's calling. The restoration continues. Get your passes today. See you in Music City.
Thank you so much for joining us, and don't forget to hit the thumbs up on this video. And a special thank you to all of our advertising partners. Please remember to shift your dollars to support those businesses that support Badlands Media.